like and subscribe. Now. OB-GYNs of Reddit. What's the most mind-blowing thing a husband or boyfriend has said? My mom was a general practitioner. She once had a 15-year-old girl come in who had a pregnancy test show positive but was adamant she couldn't be pregnant. My mom confirmed the pregnancy but the girl still refused to believe it was true. She went on to explain to my mom it was impossible for her to get pregnant because her boyfriend had told her that if she laid completely still during sex then she wasn't sexually active and couldn't get pregnant. But doctor, I'm sexually passive. I was refraining from responding to any of the comments in this thread until I read this. This is the kind of loophole you use with the church, not with your doctor, and I can't stop laughing. But I wasn't sexually active. I just laid there. That doesn't count. I'm a nurse and helped deliver this girl's first baby. I was still in school at the time. She was like 19, I think. The father, who was obviously much older, was also in the room. After baby was born everyone was all excited and emotional, except for the father, who was just like and shrugged it off. My mother is an OB-GYN. She did a manual vaginal exam for a woman and the husband asked her, with an angry tone of voice, if there was any other way of doing the exam besides her using her fingers, because he didn't like her putting her fingers in his wife. She should have said that she was doing the exam digitally. ER nurse here had a 19-year-old woman come in for abdominal pain. She had 2 kids and was pregnant again. She said she was not happy to be pregnant again but she didn't want to break up with her boyfriend. I thought the BF may have been abusive or not letting her use birth control or something, so I closed the door and asked her some questions. Turned out she didn't know sex caused babies. Her sex ed consisted of get boyfriend married and the babies arrived with no other details. So she thought once you had a boyfriend, babies were automatic and sex was just a fun thing to do. We had a long talk. That is sad. Not an OB, but when I was in med school I was seeing a pregnant teen who was convinced she couldn't be pregnant. I asked if she was sexually active and she said yes. And I asked if she used any type of contraception and she said no. However, she said that her BF told her he couldn't get her pregnant because he got kicked in the balls a lot. Seeing mom back in the office for her 2-week follow-up after delivery to remove stitches. She had a tear that needed repair, only to find out the stitches were gone. Turns out hubby took them out because they were bothering him during sex. This is only the first comment I've read in this thread, and I think I'm already done. Bothered me so much I almost downvote. Bruh, this made me cringe and then remember that after I gave birth to my first son, my husband tried to force his way in there, like 3 days after. Pretty sure I kicked him. I can't even describe that physical feeling, or the emotional revulsion. It was the beginning of a very long ending. I hope that woman is okay. Not an OB but I work in an ER and we had a 22-year-old woman come in a while back. I asked her what she was here for and she said I found a hole. Like an abscess? I found a hole. Okay, is it a wound? Does it hurt? No, it's just a hole. It's a black hole. I 100% didn't understand what she was talking about and knew that I wouldn't get any more info from her at the check-in desk. So I gave her the bracelet and sent her to the triage nurse, who had the same conversation with her. She couldn't specify anything beyond look, it's just a hole. It was her vagina. Do you have any more details on this BC? This is the best story in the whole thread. I have so many questions. Like how did she not notice it until 22? What made her finally notice? How did she get to 22 without having even heard the most vague mention of a vagina? Goodness gracious. Working I'm but a patient's partner not wanting us to reveal an HIV diagnosis to a patient was definitely a low point for me. Though where I work it's probably a stretch to even call that surprising. Back in my ER days, a young teenage patient came in with pregnancy type symptoms. Of course pregnancy test was positive, and appeared utterly shocked she was pregnant. I asked her if she was sexually active. Yes. Do you use condoms? No. BC? No. Still she seemed surprised this had happened. You can't get pregnant the first time. My boyfriend loves me and won't get me pregnant. It was just the tip he pulled out. Had a friend who is just like that girl. No birth control pills. No condoms. Nothing. Her methods were counting ovulation days, and her belief that Asian men are sterile. We are all Asian BTW. She's batch crazy. We went to the same high school together. Received the same sex ed. She graduated with a biology medical related degree, so I expected that she'd know better than that. Nope. Girl opted to do what she felt was right. Ah yes. Asia. That continent where no people have been born for generations. What? I know a chick who uses ovulation as birth control. She's on her 7th kid at age 28. Had her first kid at age 13. She's also been arrested multiple times with her loser boyfriend for meth related charges, including having her kids' hair follicles test positive for meth. Definitely gave a story to the nurse who was taking care of my wife and I after our second. Having been going through labor all day, only being on liquids and not giving birth till almost 9 at night, we were relaxing, relative term, with the nurse while holding the baby when I turned to ask the nurse a question. She pauses, turns away, turns back to me and responds back with, "Not anytime soon." Disappointed, I try to push for more specifics, because I had casually asked when can my wife have snacks, and that was a pretty nondescript answer for somebody who hadn't eaten in 12 hours. Turns out, though I was asking when can my wife have sex, after a good laugh the correct answer was a couple of hours. I can't imagine what was going through her head before the clarification. Bless you for looking after her snacks. 9 months pregnant women here. You best believe I packed all the snacks for such an occasion. That's hilarious and so much better than the other answers here. Not an MD, but when I was a paramedic I was called to home for a 14-year-old girl who I found standing over the toilet, and I noticed there was what looked like an umbilical cord going into the toilet. Upon further examination I discovered there was a newborn baby in the toilet. The child stated this newborn could not possibly be her baby as she was a virgin. Update. I should have said this before. The baby lived, and after I dropped baby and mom off at the hospital I don't know what happened. This is incredibly sad. My ex was a sexual health educator. It was depressing some of the stuff she'd encounter. People like this in their 20s in college. It was wild. Sounds like shock to me. And possibly miseducation or abuse. Last month, a dad asked one of our OBs for an extra stitch during his wife's repair after delivery. Her immediate response was, "Exactly how small do you need it to be, sir?" Fine legend on our unit. Now, spread this so it can become the standard response to this all too common statement. My dad is an OB-GYN. I asked him. He said he was delivering a baby and the father seemed extra nervous, which is to be expected, but my dad sensed something was off. Well, anyway, he delivers it, and as soon as it comes out the father yells, "It's mine, it is white." Then ran out of the room and told the family before my dad could say word. Needless to say, my dad did tell him that sometimes black children when born can look white, which lead to a big argument and security having to be called. Reminds me of the story where the baby came out a bit dark and the husband went on and in about his wife cheating and had his whole family basically abuse her, only to find out that he was the one cheating and projected his guilt on her. What an A. Not an OBGYN. But my OBGYN had a sex talk with me instead of my parents. They withdrew me from sex ed classes and made me show up to a counselor instead, promising they would teach sex ed on their own time. Anyway, the OBGYN said that anal sex is legitimate but that you can't get pregnant from it. She had met at least 8 couples in her lifetime. Age was late 40s, early 50s, where the couple was having fertility issues, and it was because the husband was using the wrong hole. I repeat, the husband was using the wrong hole. It was even more mortifying because these were very traditional couples, Asian, Indian, Christian, and they were horrified they were committing sodomy. So yeah, the conversations that woman must have had. It's always confused me how humans can mess it up so bad. Animals have in their instincts to do it correctly, yet we have folk who can't do it for the life of them. I assume animals F up frequently, but nobody is keeping score for them. I'm not an OB-GYN. However, I am a flight medic who has delivered 3 babies. I'll never forget any of them. The second baby I delivered was about 5 weeks early, roadside, in East Jesus nowhere. The family had gone camping in the desert and mom went into labor. By the time we arrived, there was no turning back and baby's head was visible. Mom was sort of squatting with her forearms on the middle row of seats in a van and her booty was aimed out the door. She was clothed in a loose dress. Just as she was pushing the head out, Dad said, wait, we might get blood on the floor." Mom rounded on him with the biggest death glare and said, "F$ your mom's van." That became a unit motto. 8 months pregnant and was feeling a desert vacation in East Jesus nowhere. Thanks for expanding my euphemism repertoire there. That's a good one. This reminds me of the time when my brother hit his head on the edge of a stone wall. He was bleeding everywhere and my mother told my father to get the first aid kit from the car. My father responded with, "But it's brand new." You can probably guess what happened next. Sister is a nurse in the mom-baby unit who will also work in labor and delivery. One dad asked for a C-section so her vagina wouldn't be ruined. Or another dad asking for her to be stitched up extra tight after delivery. Bonus: the husband stitch. Hate that it's even a thing. Okay, as a young father, this comment has just sent me on a bit of a journey through the internet. Immediately after my daughter was born and I was holding her in my arms for the first time, a midwife called me to the foot of my partner's bed and asked me to take a look, which I did. She then asked me, "Since there's only slight tearing, do I think there's need for any extra stitches?" My partner and I shared a look of WTF for a second and I replied with, "I don't know, I'm not a doctor," with a bit of a shrug and laugh, trying not to look like a total dumbass and thinking, holy sh, did I miss something in all those books and classes we did? In conclusion, why in the ever-loving F is this a thing that is done? My obgyn with my first gave me the husband stitch. It made intercourse so painful until my second baby tore it out 3 years later. Not a physician, but one of the OBGYN docs I work with told me about a couple who came in for infertility counseling. She was asking them about the length of her cycle, lifestyle, etc and came to find out that they weren't penetrating during intercourse. A fertility specialist told us during his lecture that his favorite was a couple where the woman took birth control the entire time they were trying to conceive. All my friends got pregnant on it, so I thought it might help. Also, there was a couple who had sex up to 80 times a week. Dude was probably shooting blanks at that rate. Not an OB-GYN but a nurse. And not anything a husband or boyfriend said, but still an interesting story. I once took care of a patient who had a baby as a virgin. She was a very religious woman who was saving her virginity for marriage. She told me she never met the right man and she was ready to have a baby as she was getting older. She was in her early 40s, so she had IVF done and had a baby while also being a virgin. Dad is a 30-plus-year obgyn, now retired. He tells a story of a hyper-religious couple, Muslim, who came in about difficulty getting pregnant. He examined the woman alone and discovered that she was actually a removed accidental slur. Sorry, intersex, male gonads, undistended, no uterus, normal vulva vagina. The woman was mortified to learn this at 18. She feared her husband would be violent, believing he had been being gay by having sex with her. My dad gave her the option to call the police or ask for help. He and the nurses gave her phone numbers for counseling and offered discretion when talking to the spouse. She declined everything and asked that they tell the husband together. The man was super upset, and they eventually left the office both in tears. Dad never saw her again and wonders what happened. These are such tricky situations. My grandpa was a surgeon, private practice and in the army. Towards the end of his life we discussed some of the crazy things he did and saw. He told me he operated on a man with 2 tumors in his abdomen that turned out to be fully developed ovaries, fully functioning penis, no vagina or tubes, etc. Grandpa told him the tumors were successfully removed. Sex is a crazy thing. Not an OBGYN here. My ex-boyfriend was adamantly against me using tampons, cups, discs or anything that had to be inserted. He told me it would change the shape of my vagina. He believed that after a certain amount of time together, my vagina would change to his shape so we would be a perfect fit. That and me using supers or ultra tampons would mean I would need a girthy airman because, you know, a wad of cotton would stretch me out like crazy. So my question is, does that perfect fit scenario also apply to the 11 other women he was boning on the side? No, just me? Or, I must be special? I have to ask this. Was his penis less girthy than a soaked tampon? It sounds like it is if he thinks you'll need a girthier man thanks to a tampon. We had a father bring his PS4 to a delivery room so he could play Spider-Man while his wife got induced. Another guy was found to be cheating when his wife was postpartum and went to use his phone to take pics of the baby. Whoops. Back in my OB rotation in med school, we had a pregnant woman who was super morbidly obese with a BMI in the 70s. During her first prenatal visit, the resident was asking about her pregnancy history, past difficulty with fertility and conception, problems with the pregnancy so far, etc. Pretty standard stuff as far as I understood at the time. Husband then chimed in about the conception. Turns out they had no trouble conceiving. He then went into detail about how the conception went and blew my little inexperienced mind. Basically, the wife's mother and sister had to help with conception by holding the wife's thighs out of the way enough that he could get in to do the job. I still don't have words. I used to be an L&D nurse. I've heard a similar story from a patient, except in their case it was friends from church. I have friends, but I don't have friends like that. I have friends, but I don't have friends like that. I thought my mob bestie was a ride or die when she held my wedding dress up so I could pee. That's whole different level of friend. She probably would hold fat flaps though she's pretty awesome. Lol. I missed 2 minutes ago when I didn't know this. Why the F did I even click on this post? My sister is a high-risk labor and delivery nurse and gets morbidly obese women often. I asked her one day how they even managed to be penetrated and she said they use a broomstick. I'm sure I looked flabbergasted as she quickly explained they use a broomstick to basically hold the abdominal fat up towards the chest and out of the way. I don't think I looked any less flabbergasted. There's a mind picture you can never unsee. Reminds of a story I read on here where they used a plank of wood called the brighten board. Normally, holding someone's thighs out of the way so someone else can inseminate them would really make you examine your life choices. Teamwork makes the cream work. My dad is a doctor and his friend was a OB-GYN and was telling my dad a time when a couple came into his office and they were having difficulty having a child. They were trying for over a year to have a child but the wife never got pregnant. Found out that the man and the woman came up in very strict upbringing and the man was never putting his penis inside her. He was basically rubbing his penis on top of her vagina and would ejaculate across her belly. Then he would take his finger and smear his semen all over the top of her vagina. My dad's friend had to explain sex to the both of them and tell them what to do and how to do it. Was an awkward conversation. I just kept thinking, did they not ever watch porn or have that talk with their parents? Have they never seen stuff related to sex ever? Was just a crazy story. I wonder if they ever figured it out and actually eventually had kids or not. My friend told me that her OB/GYN friend told her that apparently a significant number of people try to get pregnant by anal. Proper sex education matters, people. Years ago, I knew a woman that really wanted to get pregnant but it wasn't happening. She told me that one problem was her husband insisted on turning her around at the end and finishing in her ray. Now, she knew that wasn't good for conception. But he didn't, and she couldn't explain it to him in a way that worked. I am no an OB-GYN, but I do have a friend that is. One of her more recent crazy comments was a guy who thought that giving birth gave women massive orgasms. He genuinely believed that was how they pushed the baby out, and that it felt great. Hope you forgive me for the switch around, but when my GF had given birth to our son at home it was about 8 at night. The two midwives had been there since before dinner time. So when our son was born and we were all talking about how everything went well and our son was cuddling up to my GF in bed, I asked if I should order pizza for us all. I reckoned they were pretty hungry. I sure was. Their dry answer was that that was the first time they were ever asked that. And no, they didn't want pizza. So no pizzerino for new dadarino either. After labor, I would have given my left arm for fresh pizza delivery. Delivery is a marathon and I was famished afterward. Sorry they were lame. It's not delivery. It's DJI, I'm so sorry. Not a mind-blowing thing that was said, but still kinda funny. When I was in medical school, I did my OB rotation on the high-risk area. Medical students were generally scared of this area. So I was the only student with an awesome attending and got to do a lot. We called the attending on this service a random thought generator. If he thought of something, he would say or act on it. We had one patient that showed up on our service in active labor. She had a very uneventful pregnancy and we couldn't figure out how she was on our service. But, hey, we'll take a normal patient. She arrived with perfect makeup, perfect hair, and she had the perfect epidural and was in no pain or distress. The attending looked at me and said that I'd be doing this delivery. Okay, I thought, no problem. Then he looked at the father and said, no, you'll deliver this one. The father got wide-eyed and the mother started laughing. He's an air traffic controller. I've never seen him panic before. The nurse took him to the sink, gave him a scrub brush and had him start washing his hands. We turned back to the mom. Okay. Push 1, 2, 3.10. Relax. We looked at the dad and he's still washing that same finger he started with. Okay. That's good enough. A delivery is by no means sterile. Put this and this on. Our attending didn't put women in stirrups, but would instead deliver straight onto the bed. He sat the dad on the bed with him on one side and me on the other side, and the dad delivered his own healthy child. Not a doctor, but when I was pregnant with my first and only child, my ex-husband was an embarrassment. During the labor and delivery class he was on his phone most of the time, to the point I fell down when I was supposed to be balancing on a ball. When asked how he felt about the baby, he stated, "I'm not making a big deal out of it," shrugged and went back to playing on his phone. The other couples in the class came up to me during the break to ask if I was doing okay, and even the instructor voiced her concern with me privately. I had to have an emergency C-section and he just fell asleep. The nurse woke him up by screaming at him that I was going into the operating room. He didn't want to hold our son. He didn't want to change diapers. He would scream at our 2-day-old son for crying and get mad at me for not getting up and doing anything. The nurses kicked him out and 3 of them gave me names for divorce lawyers, one of which I eventually used. The kicker: my ex begged me for a kid because all he wanted was to be a dad. I was on the fence on having kids. 2 years before my son was born, he told my mom that he was going to divorce me if we didn't have a child. Update: wow, I honestly didn't think this comment would get this much attention. Thank you for the awards and all the nice comments. To answer some questions that I saw before my son: he was an okay husband. When we first met he was amazing, but now that I look back, I could see he just wanted a live-in caretaker. Hindsight is always 20/20. He was a bit addicted to video games, but for the most part we got on decently. The video game addiction just got so much worse after my son was born, and he began prioritizing them over me and our son. Just one of the many reasons I left. Yes, he still has contact with my son. He pushed for 50/50 custody so he wouldn't have to pay child support, which he got, and neither of us owed child support. Now my son only sees him on weekends if that. I'm working with a lawyer to get child support from him. My son is great. He started kindergarten last year and is excelling in math and reading. He's been on the honor roll every quarter. He's turning 6 in a few months, and while motherhood is difficult, especially while working full-time, I love him more than anything in this world. He's taught me a lot about myself and brought so much joy to my life. I can't wait till it's safe to go to Disneyland again because I'm taking him for a week. He wanted the title of dad but not the responsibilities that comes with it. I'm so sorry this happened to you, but I'm glad you kicked him out of your life. Not a doctor, but pregnant. I told my BF we should make and freeze 1-2 months of meals before the birth, because we'd be too tired to cook. He looked at me knowingly and said, "Ah, yes, like pureed fruits and vegetables so we don't have to mash them ourselves." He literally thought you feed the baby food from day one. We're in our 30s, college educated. He has a huge, close extended family with lots of babies, and he knows I'm going to breastfeed. I guess he thought you'd be both from day one. Compared to the horror show that is the rest of this thread, yours is kinda sweet. Not a medic, but I have been told by one midwife that a guy asked her to hurry up with the birth as the footy was starting soon and it's a cup match. My ex-boyfriend is an OB-GYN. He got annoyed with me when I was having cramps and said because he was an OB-GYN he knew exactly what that pain felt like and told me to get over it. Shoulder seen that as the first of many red flags.